Who does Nelson Mandela belong to? There has been a fair amount of consternation over the issue, especially after the DA invoked Madiba's legacy in its election advertising. The ANC is adamant the former president is part of the party's legacy. Political analyst and writer Professor Raymond Suttner has put an argument forward about Nelson Mandela's legacy in his article, Is the ANC Still the Bearer of Nelson Mandela's Legacies? And that was published on the Polity website. He's with us in studio to speak to us a little bit more about this. Welcome, Prof. Good to see you.
Thank you.
For starters, I mean, a lot of people from the ANC were totally enraged that the DA should try to hijack the legacy of Nelson Mandela and use them for its campaign. Were you as outraged?
Well, I wasn't so outraged. I do think it is a little bit cheap, in that the DA should find its own heroes and heroines and not try and appropriate Nelson Mandela, who's very clear that he was from the ANC. But what I tried to put across in my article is the legacies of Nelson Mandela are quite complicated. And it's not absolutely clear. In fact, I would say it's fairly clear that the ANC of today does not represent the best of the legacies of Nelson Mandela, the integrity, the willingness to serve, and a range of other qualities which I think are being undermined through abuse by the current leadership and practices of the ANC.
I want to look at areas like, that were previous strongholds of the ANC, areas like Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane, Johannesburg, where people felt very passionately about the ruling party. How is it that opposition parties have made inroads into those particular areas over the last few years?
Well, I think it's quite important not to give a generalized answer, because every constituency will have its own dynamics. Like Gauteng, as the different parts of Gauteng have got different dynamics, and Nelson Mandela has had fairly weak leadership. The ANC itself recognized that up to 2011 they had very weak leadership, and I think people have a sense that the ANC has not met the promises, and there have been a number of scandals that have been uncovered or are still alleged, and they've tried through bringing in Danny Jordan to turn things around. It appears to me, from what I see, that he has done fairly well there. So I think there may be an overflow from the national into the domestic, but I think at a domestic level, at a local level, the ANC is not perceived, and I'm not familiar with the full record, not perceived as having performed very well, and this is reflected in polls. But I'm not myself wanting to take a bet on polls.
Well, let's ask you about the specific incidents of Tshwane, the violence that we saw resulting from Togo Didiza's announcement as the mayoral candidate. Do you believe that violence eventually happened because there were ideological differences between people?
Well, this is the main thing that I feel is the difference between Nelson Mandela's period and the present, is that the ANC has lost its sense of debate. We used to debate a lot, and Nelson Mandela used to get very angry sometimes. He's seen as this kindly man, but something of the boxer would come through, because he would feel very strongly, and sometimes we dared to disagree with him, but the rest of the ANC would disagree over a lot of things, and that disagreement is not found anymore in relation to ideological questions. If you look at all the places where there have been killings, where there have been divisions, there is no mention of policy differences. And I think the truth of the matter is that the ANC is a gateway towards some economic gains or economic security, and this is what it was really about in Tshwane, that with the two contestants being displaced by Didiza, people didn't know what was going to happen and how spoils would be divided.
Would you say the same thing happened in KwaZulu-Natal, where we've seen a number of political
Yes, definitely. In KwaZulu-Natal, The eThekwini regional elections were postponed repeatedly for over a year, and it had nothing to do with National Democratic Revolution or the Freedom Charter or anything like this. It had to do with contesting patronage groups supporting one candidate rather than another. And there's no sense of ideology in the provincial or the regional or the local.
So I want to ask you, if we pull all these threads together and we look at the legacies not only of Nelson Mandela, because many people have pointed out to you on social media when you advertised our interview, that it wasn't just Nelson Mandela on his own. There were a number of greats in the ANC who brought us liberation in this country. When we think of Albert Luthuli, when we think of Walter Sisulu and other heavyweights in the ANC, do you believe the party is still on the path that those men set it on?
I don't think they are. Let's just take Albert Luthuli. Albert Luthuli's 50th anniversary of his death will be next year. When it was the 50th anniversary of his getting the Nobel Prize, it coincided with eNCA's anniversary. The eNCA anniversary was widely celebrated. People ignored Luthuli. Luthuli stands for peace, and one of the problems of the present is the violence. The marked feature of the Zuma era is shoot to kill, mshini wam, kill for Zuma, and a range of things that undermine the gains, the democratic gains, which depend on non-violence. We should be popularizing peace, and this is what is being lost. And peace is what Nelson Mandela, when he came out of jail, Walter Sisulu, devoted all their efforts to achieving.
Thank you so much for sharing your thinking behind that article with us. Very good to have you in the studio this evening, Professor Raymond Suttner.